I'm really happy to be here. I have attended this conference for a long, long time and really happy to come back and return as a speaker. This conference is near and dear to my heart because when I started out in application security, this was the first security conference I attended. So, like I say, I was here as a speaker before. Who am I? I'm Kristen. I've been in application security over 11 years. Currently a managing consultant. And the talk I did a couple of years ago sort of evolved into this. After I got done, I was asked to turn it into a blog series. And as I kept adding content to the blog posts, I started realizing that the conversation was getting more and more generic. It was more about mentoring. The original was, the root cause of both talks is the same. And that is that we have a shortage of people to fill all the demand for the jobs that we have. And it's the same problem that we've been suffering for a number of years. And it seems like we're all kind of competing for the same talent. So what a lot of organizations have sort of come down to is a grassroots movement of growing their own workforce. And like I say, as I was doing these blogs and writing about mentoring and doing a lot of mentoring myself, I sort of came up with some ideas and some tried and true things that work. So that's what this is about. And we're going to talk first about what we're looking for in terms of candidates. And then go through kind of steps to how to get somebody from an entry level to an active, productive member of your team. So first of all, who are we looking for? There's obviously a small sector of individuals who are in a different career path and want to, I call them hobbyists. They're people who've gone to cons, they might have gone to CTFs, and they're very interested in changing their career path. And however, they've made great candidates, and I've seen great success. In fact, I know very well an individual who spent years in insurance, but he loves security, did a lot of it on the side, and he's now a really great IT security professional. But we don't see that as much. One really interesting pool of people is military veterans coming out of service. We read articles all the time about them having a hard time finding good, solid work when they come out of service, and yet many of them have cybersecurity experience. It's not necessarily the skill set that we're looking for, but at this point with these candidates, what we're looking for is aptitude. We don't really care that their skill set is spot on. The other more obvious pool of people is, of course, college and university graduates. And I bring that up only to say that though we're seeing a lot more resumes with people coming out of specialization degrees in IT security, the college curriculum systems haven't quite caught up. And I just want to throw it out there that don't overlook a really good candidate who comes out of a generic computer science degree program. I think those of us of a certain age who hold computer science degrees have generic computer science degrees because when we were in school, that's all that was offered. So like I say, I just throw that out there because, again, we're looking for aptitude, and book smarts turn out to be very, very different than real-world experience in our business. So what else are we looking for in these candidates? We obviously need self-starters. We are very, very busy. We are overworked because we don't have the workforce that we need to do all the work that needs to get done. So we need people, and then, of course, I tell people when I get strangers email me all the time on LinkedIn, how do I get into IT security? What do I need to learn? And I always tell them, this isn't just a job. This is a lifestyle. You enter into this line of work, and you are going to be learning for the rest of your career. It's not a static thing. There are things, technologies that I'm assessing today that literally did not exist when I entered into this workforce. So that's very, very important. We also are looking for people with passion, of course, and an interest in what we do. And then client-facing. And as I've gone through and sort of practiced this presentation, I realized client-facing may not be quite the term, but strong communication skills. And there's a couple of different reasons why. I tell this story, several years ago, I had to go on site to a client and assess a piece of software. This piece of software was their product, one of their products in their new line. And they had a release date. They had press releases set. This was not a soft rollout, and I was there to assess the product prior to the release. I found some pretty serious stuff and, of course, made it known. And the next thing I know, I am being showed into the CISO's office to explain it to him in a way that he could take that information and then translate that information to his other C-level executives. Because he understood that if they couldn't get it fixed by the release date, they may have to delay the release. After that, of course, we were working against the clock, and I had to go talk to the development group. And I had to give them remediation techniques, resources, the exact location of where these vulnerabilities existed. And then after that, the business owners wanted to understand what the consequences were to their business reputation. Following that, after the dust had sort of settled, it was a very long day, was talking to my security contact on site. He was more of a generalist. He needed to know how to make sure that these things were fixed once I was on my plane home. And he was there to make sure that the remediation was properly put in place. So I had to have a lot of different conversations with a lot of different groups of people, and I had to give them the same kind of information, but in ways that they cared about it. And, you know, DerbyCon starting up, and I love DerbyCon. A couple years ago, there was like a recurring theme. Two or three of the speakers that I saw, they all talked about the horrific reports that they were seeing coming out of IT security. And it wasn't that the reports were technically bad. It was that they were just bragging hackfest, look at how great a hacker I am. Totally not consumable by the people and the audience that needed to read and understand the information. So I was actually really happy to hear that. And I went back to my first team meeting after that DerbyCon, and I was asked to give a, what did you learn, what talks did you see? And I said, guys, we're doing something really, really well. We're writing great reports, and apparently our peers in the business are not. There's a reason that our commercial tools have canned reports with executive summaries. You know, our services are expensive, and the ROI is not very tangible. People want to read and understand who are the decision makers and the dollar spenders of what they're getting back, what we're finding, what we're seeing, and how we're adding value. So, like I say, communication skills are really, really important. And especially for someone like me, who the majority of my clients, I will never meet face-to-face. The only impression that they get from me is via email or written communication or a phone call, and then my report at the end of the day, my deliverable. So, you know, it's just, like I say, if you have somebody that's kind of introverted, just make sure that they are mentorable enough to become client-facing. I think that that's really, really important. Okay. So now that we've kind of talked about who we're looking for, who makes good, solid candidates, how do we get them from entry level to being productive, independent worker? I'm going through this from an application security perspective because that's my bailiwick, but some of these concepts are for mentors in general across the board, and some of them I think are very translatable to whatever you are trying to train and whatever type of workforce you are trying to build. So, be an enabler. We're so busy we can't spoon feed. So it's very, very important that we enable, and that's going to be a reoccurring theme throughout the rest of the talk, on different techniques and ways that we can enable people. Self-education is the first step, obviously. It's very, very important. And I brag on our industry because there's so much information out there. Anything you want to learn about, it's pretty much out there and free to get. But for new people coming into our industry, this can be extraordinarily overwhelming. So I always suggest kind of giving a broad spectrum of all the different things from soup to nuts that somebody needs to be able to become successful in their career field. Deliverables. Everybody has like an artisan on their team who writes the most beautiful reports. Those report examples, that example of solid work should be put in front of new people. It's a great learning tool. They'll start to see patterns, things that we typically see in every assessment, kind of low-hanging fruit. And then the other things, checklists, methodologies. Don't just give them like vulnerabilities, how to find them, what their definitions are. There's a whole lot more that they need to learn to become successful. So self-education is very, very important. And in this first step, starting right there, one of the most important things about mentoring people successfully is being available. The last thing you want to do, busy as you might be, is stick somebody in a corner with books and videos and things like that. It's going to stagnate them. They're going to feel like if they want to ask you something or take a moment of your time, that they're a burden to you. But most importantly, it's for you as a mentor that it's so important to become available, because you're building a relationship with these people. You have to understand their strengths, their weaknesses, how they learn, where gaps in their knowledge may reside, and then you start realizing what their interests are. So application security isn't just like one thing. There's specializations in it. And as you build these relationships and you start seeing what really sparks somebody's interest, you'll start realizing what their specialization might be. So again, very, very important, and this will keep coming up, but be available. I will tell you, at one point, not very long ago, I was on a leadership team. I had 5 people on my team. I had 3 people I was mentoring, and I had an average utilization rate of 98%. These people didn't eat my day. And I did all this, and I did it reasonably. At this point in the self-education process, you're talking about giving people 5 to 10 minutes a day. And it might just be a conversation, hey, what are you reading? Do you have any questions? Did you find something interesting? And they just want to talk. So very, very important. After you're kind of having intelligent conversations with them and you feel like they're kind of beginning to get it, then it's time to set them up with their toolbox. And by this, I don't mean, I know some of you are thinking about our organization, we have approved tool sets that we must use. But let's face it, in our world, whether it's our commercial tools or the small scripts, we have either tools that are filled with many tools, tools that we fine-tune, word lists, other little things that we use to help us complete our jobs and then help us do our work. Screen share with them. Show them some of these things. Do you daisy chain tools together? Why? What scenarios? How do you do it? This is kind of where I say the rubber meets the road. And this is where it doesn't matter if your mentoree is sitting across the table or 500 miles away. You start hearing the spark and the interest, because they've been reading about all these cool things that they're going to get to do, and now they're seeing it. They're seeing it in real life. So, next step, after you kind of feel like they're getting comfortable, let them shadow you. And what does this look like? Well, it doesn't look like an international retail corporation that if something goes down, it's going to cost the client millions of dollars in a day. In the InfoSec world, what we're looking for is a smaller, less complex application that's in a test or a QA environment with data that's not production data. It might be test data, it might be a small snippet of production data, or it's data that's been backed up and will be restored at the completion of testing. And what you do with them is you screen share, make sure that they have kind of got everything working, and then you say, look, I want you to go out and find whatever you can find. And every couple of days throughout the engagement, I'm going to check back in with you, and we're going to talk. And then at the end of the engagement, after doing that every couple of days, share your test notes. Let them see what you found that they haven't. And then, more importantly, let them see the whole process on how to run a project. So if you have client calls, if you have kickoff meetings, whatever they might be, have them listen in. Have them see what a project looks like, right? And then share with them the deliverable at the end of the day so they know kind of how all of that stuff, all of those findings and all of those notes end up in the final report. And at the same time, when you're doing this, if you have good reports with solid evidence, you should be able to give them retest and validation work. It's whatever you call it. When somebody says, hey, I fixed something, can you see if it's really fixed? Whatever that process is. What's really good about this is now you're starting to see an ROI with your person. They're actually being able to do real-world work. And they're going to be able to deliver some small scale of a deliverable. Typically, these kinds of engagements, you're not writing a whole deliverable from scratch. It's an addendum to a report. It might be an edited report. And in this process, we're going to talk about peer review. But I'll come back to that after the next one. So just keep it in the back of your head. So these two processes of them shadowing you and then maybe getting some of this retest or validation work, you can do several iterations. You'll start to see kind of where their strengths are and what they're not finding and those kinds of things. Once you feel like they've gotten to a point where they're ready for that next step, then you want to find something where you can shadow them. And why are you shadowing them? Again, you're building a relationship. You're working with them. You're figuring out how they learn, all of those things. But all of this building the workforce, regardless of whether your clients are internal or external, this should be a totally transparent process. Your clients should never be burdened by the fact that you're building your team and growing your workforce. So at this rate, this is the point where this person goes and they initiate a project entirely on their own. But you're in the background shadowing them as if they're not doing the work, so that if they do miss anything, then at the end, you can come back to them, add your findings to theirs. And then the really cool part about this is for the very first time, they're going to build a full-fledged deliverable. The most important part of these two things, whether it be the validation reporting or a full-fledged deliverable, is peer review. I don't care if you have a formal process, if you have no process at all. Build in this step into your mentoring. You must be the person who does the peer review. You must see everything that they turn out before the client does, whether it be external or internal. And this is your time to see their writing skills, to see what kinds of evidence that they're coming up with. Is it solid? Do they need an extra screenshot here and there? Are the screenshots readable? It's very, very important. And again, you need to know. If this peer review goes to somebody else on the team and it's a mess, you'll never really know. You won't see it. You, as the mentor, have to have your eyes on this part of the project. It's very, very important. So like I said, even if you have no peer review at all, just make sure that you're seeing all this. Again, it's for client transparency as well. So as you're kind of going through and doing all of these exercises, especially when you're talking about people who this may be their very first professional job, there's an opportunity to talk about personal brand. Personal brand is kind of a buzz term that's been flying around our industry the last couple of years, but it's very, very important, and especially for those of us who don't come face-to-face with most of our clients. Personal brand is basically how people perceive us. And there's a lot of opportunity to do coaching as you're mentoring and to talk to people. We get into a lot of sticky situations. I tell people, when people ask what do I do for a living, I tell them this thing, and it sounds like a joke, but it's really kind of not funny. And that is, our prerogative is to go out, no matter what you do in IT security, tell somebody their baby's ugly, in a way that they don't just say thank you, but they say come back and do more work for us. That's kind of a hard thing to do. And we have to foster some of this personal brand. Talk to them about some of the scenarios that you come up against, that you've seen or you've heard about. Tell them stories and coach them. Hey, this is a good way to handle this particular situation. And I guarantee if you do this long enough, you'll come up against it. Very, very important kind of conversations to have. And I think that that's part of the mentoring. Do all of these things with positive guidance. It's so important. And always remember that at one point, you were that person. And they look at us as seasoned professionals like we're some kind of rock star. Just make yourself human to them. If they're struggling with something and it's something that you struggled with, tell them that. The positive guidance is important from a lot of different categories. We're there, again, to enable them. We're trying to make them, give them the tools that they need to become successful. And there's a whole lot of things, there's a whole lot of ways to go about that. We don't want to be the taskmaster, and we don't want to, get the red pen out constantly. But talk to them and understand that you were there too, right? So the other thing, if you don't do a whole lot of mentoring, this might not be as obvious, but it's really important. And part of you enabling them and building this relationship and knowing kind of where they're at is when they're ready for those next steps, is communicating that. If you are the mentor, first of all, I have had people who I've mentored that thought they were ready for the next step when they absolutely weren't, but they had great confidence, and that was good. And I've had people that didn't have that confidence and were so ready for the next step, and yet probably never would have taken it voluntarily. And I guess what I'm trying to say is the people that you mentor probably really don't have a clue. This is kind of up to you to know. And that's part of why you're building that relationship. The other problem is, whether you're on the leadership team or you're reporting to the leadership team, they have no idea when this person's ready for the next step. And part of your job as a mentor and as an enabler is to make it known. Fight for them. Say, hey, this person's really ready to do a shadow. We need to find them. We need to look for this type of engagement. When we get this kind of project come along, let's get them involved. The other thing, along with this type of communication, when we have people that we're mentoring, obviously we want to get some return on investment. Obviously we're very busy. So we tend to give these people sideline projects, things that they can handle, we don't have time for, and they help the team. That's all fine and good, except when these projects become 40-hour-a-week projects and they're eating up this person's whole day. The person's not getting to the next level, and you are not growing your workforce. And it's up to you as the mentor to go to leadership or whomever and say, hey, it's great that we have this person, that they're an active, productive member of the team, that they're doing these things that we don't have time for, but it's taking up so much of their time that it's hurting us. We need to schedule solid time within their schedule, within their calendar, for them to devote totally to mentoring, and we need to figure out how to free them up. And the reason that you're kind of doing these things is, where do you want to see your team in a year, 2 years, 5 years? The way you mentor people is how great your team will be in the future. So very, very important. I'm privileged to be a part of this industry. I have had the privilege of having clients that fall within, to be vague enough, the Fortune Top 20. I've seen vulnerabilities that I've identified remediated, and I know that they've had tremendous impacts on lots and lots of people. And there's nothing better. It's kind of fun to sit back and realize some of that. The other thing in my career that I've found that is really, really rewarding beyond belief is to watch someone come into their first job out of college and end up being a successful IT security professional. There's nothing better than that. I know that some of us have known information hoarders in our life. They're missing the boat. This is one of the best and most positive experiences. And with that, I'm going to leave you all with one of my favorite quotes. It's how I tried to live, it's how I try to manage, and it's how I try to mentor. And I hope that I've also provided you with some new ideas on going back and building your own workforces. And thank you so much for having me. And I talked really fast because I got through that exceptionally fast. So any questions? And maybe I have an answer, maybe I don't. Okay. Thank you.